One of the most curious things about life is that we are almost never quiet. Even when there is no sound, our minds are making noise, a restless hum of thought, like the soft turning of a motor that never stops. And yet, silence. Silence is always there. Like the sky behind the clouds, it never really goes away. We think silence is the absence of something, don't we? A sort of blankness, an emptiness to be filled. But perhaps silence is not the absence of sound. Perhaps it is the presence of everything else. The stillness behind the sound, the space that holds the notes of a song together, the pause between your thoughts. That is where silence lives. Stop for a moment. Listen. There it is. You can hear the hum of the world, maybe a car passing, the faint buzz of electricity, your own breath. But listen a little deeper, and you'll notice that all of these sounds arise in silence. They come and go while the silence remains, like waves appearing and vanishing on the surface of the sea. And that's the first little trick of silence. It's not something you can make. You can't try to be silent, because the moment you try, you're making noise again. You're thinking about being silent, you're struggling to stop the struggle, and the more you try to silence the mind, the louder it becomes. The art of silence, you see, is not in suppression, but in surrender. You don't silence the noise, you listen so completely that the noise becomes transparent. You stop fighting with it. You let the chatter be until it begins to lose its hold, like a child that stops crying when it realizes it's being held. And slowly, you begin to sense the silence underneath. Not the silence of discipline or control, but the natural quiet that is always here, always waiting patiently beneath the surface of thought. Most people fear silence. We fill it with conversation, with music, with plans, with screens, because silence confronts us with ourselves. It doesn't distract, it doesn't comfort, it doesn't explain. It simply mirrors whatever is there. And for many, that's a little uncomfortable, because in silence, you can hear your own heartbeat. You can hear the anxious whisper that says, "What am I doing? Where am I going?" And yet that is the beauty of it. For it is only in silence that you can begin to truly listen to yourself. Silence, then, is not a void to escape. It is the most intimate companion of all. It is the ground of being, the womb from which every thought, every word, every note of music is born. When a composer writes, it is silence that gives the music form. Without the pauses between notes, there would be no melody, only noise. When a painter paints, it is the empty canvas that makes the color meaningful. Silence is the space in which life happens. But notice how we misunderstand it. We imagine silence as death, stillness as stagnation. Yet what could be more alive than silence? Every bird, every breeze, every heartbeat emerges from it. Silence is not still, it is teeming, fertile, breathing. Like the soil beneath the forest, it is full of unseen life. And sometimes, when you are very quiet, not trying to be, just gently allowing yourself to be, you begin to feel that silence is listening back, as though the universe itself were hearing through you, because in truth, it is. You are not apart from that silence, you are it. The same quiet awareness that watches the breath move in and out, that hears the sound of my voice right now, that is the silence itself. Listen. You can feel that space behind your thoughts, can't you? The still background against which all experience dances. That's not your silence, that is the silence. The silence of the whole cosmos. The strange thing about silence is that the more deeply you enter it, the less lonely it becomes. At first, it feels empty, even a little cold, because the noise of our minds has been our constant company. But as you relax into it, you discover that silence is full of a mysterious warmth, a kind of presence that doesn't need to say anything. It's the same stillness you find when you look into the eyes of someone who truly understands you. No words, no explanations, just the simple recognition of being here, together. And then you begin to notice that the world itself is never really silent. Even the quietest places have their subtle symphonies, the rustle of leaves, the pulse of your own blood, the soft creak of a floor. Silence isn't the absence of sound, it is the harmony of all sounds, the way they fit together in a perfect whole. Noise is discord, but silence. Silence is music without a score. To live in silence doesn't mean to escape sound, it means to stop fighting with it. To listen so deeply that every sound, every word, every movement becomes part of one continuous song. When you are silent inside, even the noise of the city becomes beautiful. It's no longer an intrusion, it's a texture, a rhythm, part of the great unfolding of the moment. And this is where silence reveals its greatest secret. It is not separate from life. It is not something you have to find in a monastery or a cave. It is right here, in the middle of traffic, in the kitchen, in laughter, in tears. Silence is not hiding from sound, it is the listening that allows sound to be. When you begin to live from that silence, you'll find that everything softens. The edges of the world blur a little. People seem less threatening, problems feel less heavy. Because you're no longer caught in the noise of interpretation, you're resting in the quiet that holds it all. Have you noticed that when someone truly listens to you, really listens, without interrupting, without planning their reply, something in you relaxes? That's the healing power of silence. Not the silence of withdrawal, but the silence of attention, the silence that says, I am here with you. It's the same silence that the trees hold, the same silence between two lovers lying awake in the dark, just breathing. The silence that doesn't need to fix or name or conclude. It simply is. And perhaps, in the end, that is what we're all searching for. Not another word, not another answer, but the quiet assurance that we already belong, that, even in the midst of noise and chaos, there is a still center within us that never moves. A silence that cannot be disturbed, because it is what we truly are. Notice how even now, as you listen, there is silence between my words. That's where the meaning lives, not in the sound, but in the space that holds it. Just as the stars are not separate from the night sky, words are not separate from silence. They arise out of it, and they return to it. You and I, we are like that too. We rise from silence, we speak, we live, we love, and then we fall back into silence again. What we call the end is only another kind of beginning. When you fall back into silence, you do not disappear, you return to the ground of being. You return to what was never lost. Imagine for a moment that life is like a great ocean of sound. Every creature, every thought, every word is a ripple, a vibration moving across its surface. And yet, beneath all the motion, the ocean itself remains silent, not because it is dead, but because it is complete. It doesn't need to make a sound to know itself. That's the kind of silence we forget, the silence that is not the opposite of noise, but its source. A silence so vast, so infinite, that it can contain every explosion, every whisper, every heartbeat, and still be undisturbed. But we have been trained, from the time we were children, to fear that quiet. When there's a gap in conversation, we rush to fill it. When we're alone, we reach for a phone, or a thought, or a plan. We treat silence as a kind of enemy. And yet, the very thing we run from is the one thing that could truly set us free. Because silence is not empty, it's aware. It's the presence that notices everything, the unspoken witness of every movement of the mind. You can test this for yourself. Right now, without doing anything at all, just listen. Listen not for a sound, but for the listening itself. That quiet presence that's aware of hearing, that silence, that's what you are before you say, I am. Before the name, before the thought, before the story. Silence is not something you experience. It is the experiencer. And once you begin to sense that, even faintly, everything changes. The world doesn't stop moving, the birds still sing, traffic still hums, people still laugh and cry, but all of it begins to sound different. There's space around it. You stop being trapped inside the noise because you're listening from beyond it. You start to live from silence instead of merely visiting it. The great mystics of the world have always known this. They say that God speaks most clearly in silence. But perhaps that's because God is silence, the stillness in which all things are spoken into being. When you stop searching for divine words and simply listen, you discover that silence has been answering all along. Now, you might ask, but how can I bring that silence into my everyday life? How can I remain still when the world demands constant motion? But that's the trick. You don't bring silence anywhere. You don't have to do silence. You see, it's not an achievement, it's a recognition. The silence has never left. You have only become entangled in the sound. And once you notice that, once you see that all the noise is happening in silence, not outside of it, you can relax. You can smile, because even the noise is part of the quiet dance. You can test this when you walk through the city. Listen to the honking, the chatter, the footsteps, but instead of labeling them as noise, listen to them as music, as part of the same orchestra that plays the wind in the trees and the rhythm of your own heart. And then you'll find that silence is not fragile. It doesn't need to be protected from the world. It is vast enough to include the world. Notice the air around you. Notice the way sound appears and vanishes in it. That gentle vanishing, that's silence breathing. It's strange, isn't it, that silence has no shape, no color, no texture, and yet everything you see, touch, or hear depends on it. Without the space of silence, nothing could exist. Silence is the background of all creation, the invisible canvas upon which existence paints itself. And so when you return to silence, you are not withdrawing, you are coming back to the source. Sometimes people come to me and say, but my mind won't stop. I can't meditate. I can't make it quiet. And I say, good. Don't make it quiet. Just listen. Because even your thoughts are sounds in silence. Even confusion, even worry, are ripples in that same still ocean. When you stop fighting them, they lose their power. They become music too. After all, you can't hear a melody without its dissonant notes, and you can't know silence unless you allow sound to play. This is why the wisest people laugh. They've seen the joke that the whole struggle to be silent, to find peace, is itself just another noise. The moment you stop chasing silence, it comes to you. It was never gone. We imagine enlightenment as some glorious crescendo, but it's more like a gentle fading, the soft landing of a bird. The noise of seeking settles, and what's left is the quiet hum of being. No fanfare, no fireworks, just a deep, unspoken ease. And in that ease, you begin to notice something remarkable. Everything is alive with silence. The way sunlight falls across a room, the way a leaf trembles before it drops, each is a gesture of silence expressing itself. Even sound itself, when heard deeply, is a form of silence in motion. Because silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of listening. Stop again. Listen not with your ears, but with your whole being. The silence you hear is not outside, it's inside. In fact, the very distinction between inside and outside disappears in silence. There is just this moment, this breath, this vast open stillness. And yet, notice how the mind wants to name it, to grasp it, to hold it as an idea. But silence cannot be held. The moment you think you've captured it, it slips through your fingers. Because silence is not an object, it is the space between all objects. It is not a thing you possess, but the field in which possession arises. So, instead of trying to keep silence, simply be silence. When you speak, let your words come from silence. When you listen, hear through silence. When you move, let silence move with you. And then you'll find that silence isn't the opposite of sound, it's the companion of every sound. They dance together endlessly. The old sages used to say that the greatest music is played on a silent instrument. What they meant was that the deepest wisdom is not in words, but in the space between them. And if you ever truly hear that music, you'll find yourself smiling. Not because you've understood something, but because there is nothing left to understand. There is only this, the great quiet wonder of being. Sometimes, late at night, when the world grows still, you might feel that silence press gently against you like a tide moving in. And in that moment, if you don't resist, you'll sense that the silence is not something happening to you. It is you. It always has been. It's the silence that watched your first breath and will cradle your last. It's the silence between your thoughts, the pause between your words, the gap between each heartbeat. And if you can rest there even for a moment, you'll find a peace that no noise can disturb. But don't turn it into a goal. Let silence come, when it will, as it will. Sometimes it's deep and vast. Sometimes it hides behind the chatter of the mind. That's all right. Silence doesn't demand purity. It doesn't punish or reward. It simply waits, eternally patient, eternally present. And perhaps that's what love truly is. Not the fever of desire, not the rush of emotion, but the quiet understanding that you and the universe are not two. When you sit in silence with someone, no words, no expectations, that's love at its purest. Because silence does not separate, it joins. It does not divide, it holds. So, when you next feel lost or restless, don't look for answers. Just stop, listen. Not to me, not to the world, but to that soft hum beneath everything. That is the song of silence, the song that has no beginning and no end. It is the background music of existence itself. And if you can hear it even for a moment, you'll know that nothing is missing. That life has been whole all along. That the silence you sought was never apart from you. It is you. I am make EVIDM, I am IDM, I am. And so, as this little talk draws to its own stillness, you might notice the silence returning, not as an ending, but as a homecoming. The words have played their tune, and now they fade back into the vastness from which they came. All that remains is the listening. All that remains is silence.